For almost 200 million years, they were the undisputed kings of this planet. And then, poof, in a geologic blink of an eye, they were just gone. Now, we all think we know the story of how the dinosaurs died, but do we really? Today, we're digging into one of the biggest, most epic mysteries our world has ever known.
So, that's the big one, isn't it? What in the world could be powerful enough to just erase these incredible giants from existence and slam the door on their entire era? Well, the answer takes us on a journey back 66 million years, to a day that started out completely normal, but ended in a catastrophe that changed the planet forever.
You know, to really understand the end, we first have to picture the world as it was. And this wasn't some kind of barren, primitive rock. No, this was a planet that was absolutely bursting with life, a thriving, vibrant, and surprisingly stable place.
Picture this. Earth was basically a giant, global greenhouse. It was warm all over, with no ice at the poles. The continents were pretty much where they are today, and everything was covered in lush green plants. Life was everywhere, on land, in the oceans, and soaring through the skies. It was, in a lot of ways, a paradise.
And who were the kings of this paradise? Oh, just the titans. On land, you had the T-Rex, a 12-meter-long killing machine. In the air, the unbelievable Quetzalcoatlus soared with a wingspan like a small airplane. And in the seas, the Mosasaurus, stretching up to 17 meters long, was the top predator, no question. These guys weren't just animals. They were the absolute masters of their world. Yeah, it really seemed like their reign would go on forever, but a threat was coming. And it wasn't coming from another dinosaur or a sea monster. It was coming from the silent black void of space. And the story of how we figured this out is a fantastic piece of scientific detective work. The clues, it turns out, were buried right there in the rock. Back in the 70s, scientists found this weirdly thin layer of iridium all over the globe. Now, that stuff is super rare on Earth's surface, but it's really common in asteroids. Ding, ding, ding! Then, geologists looking at old oil company data found it. A colossal 180-kilometer-wide crater hidden under the Yucatan Peninsula. They had found the scene of the crime. So what actually happened when that 10-kilometer-wide rock slammed into the Earth? Honestly, the numbers are almost impossible to wrap your head around. It hit with the force of 72 trillion tons of TNT. To give you some perspective, that's more than 1,000,000 times more powerful than the biggest nuclear bomb humans have ever set off.
The impact set off an earthquake so huge, it literally shook the entire planet. We're talking about a magnitude 11 quake. A Richter scale barely even goes that high. The strongest earthquake we've ever recorded was a 9.5, and that was absolutely devastating. This was just on a whole other level.
In the oceans, it was pure chaos. The impact generated massive tsunamis, some of them reaching 300 meters high. That's as tall as a skyscraper. These gigantic waves tore across the oceans, wiping out coastlines thousands of kilometers away from where the asteroid hit.
For any poor creature that actually witnessed the impact, the sky would have instantly filled with a fireball 55 times bigger than our sun. Then came superheated winds blasting outwards at 1,000 kilometers an hour, followed by a literal rain of molten rock. But you know what? The real killer came after. All the dust and soot thrown into the atmosphere blocked out the sun for years, plunging the Earth into a long, dark, and very cold winter. And the result? It was a mass extinction on a scale that's hard to even imagine. The entire global food chain just collapsed. On land, 70% of all vertebrate species gone. In the oceans, it was even worse. Over 90% of animal life just vanished. The age of dinosaurs was officially over.
Okay, so the evidence for the asteroid is, well, it's overwhelming. The case seems pretty much closed, right? It's the accepted scientific fact. But just for the sake of exploring every angle, let's look at a much stranger and definitely less scientific idea. What if there was something else going on?
All right, we're about to take a pretty big left turn here. It's really important to say this up front. This next idea isn't a theory that came from geology or paleontology, and it doesn't have scientific evidence to back it up. It comes from a completely different way of looking at the past.
So, what is this alternative take? It asks us to forget about that giant rock from space for a minute and to think smaller, way, way smaller. The proposal is that the final nail in the dinosaur's coffin might have come from mice. Yes, mice. I mean, you couldn't get two more different ideas, could you? On one hand, you have the scientifically backed theory of a massive world-shattering catastrophe from the heavens.
And on the other hand, this idea suggests a slow, creeping, and tiny threat from right here on the ground. Okay, so here's the supposed logic. It starts from a place that kind of makes sense. In that chaotic, post-impact world, with ecosystems in shambles and food getting scarce, small, scrappy mammals like mice would have been great survivors. This theory suggests their populations just exploded. And, well, they had to eat something. And this is where the theory gets pretty gruesome. It paints this picture of desperate mice seeking out huge, sleeping dinosaurs and then crawling inside their ears and nostrils. The idea is that this would cause absolute, uncontrollable panic, leading to injuries and massive stampedes, as these terrified giants tried to escape an enemy they couldn't even see, let alone fight. People who subscribe to this idea even suggest it could be the answer to other paleontological mysteries, like those massive bone beds that look like a whole herd of dinosaurs stampeded off a cliff, or maybe why mammoths went to the freezing north, not for food, but to get away from these tiny, relentless pests.
So here we are, with two wildly different stories trying to explain the exact same event. One is a scientific theory that has been tested and supported by decades of physical evidence. The other is, well, it's a very different kind of story. So how do we even begin to compare them?
Let's just put them side by side. The asteroid theory? It's built on hard, physical stuff, geological data, a giant crater you can map. But the mouse theory? Its source is described as a spiritual revelation. And that right there is the fundamental difference. One is an explanation based on scientific evidence, and the other is a story that comes from a place of belief.
So here's the bottom line. We have one explanation that's been carefully built, piece by piece, on physical evidence that you can actually verify all over the globe. And then we have another story that, while it doesn't have that evidence, gives us a totally different, imaginative lens to look through, asking us to think about the psychology of these ancient animals.
And that kind of leaves us with a final big thought. Science is this incredible, ongoing quest to find all the puzzle pieces of our past. And our understanding is always getting better as we find new evidence. But it also reminds us that alongside science, humans have always told stories to make sense of the big, scary world. The real trick is knowing the difference between the stories the Earth tells us through evidence and the stories we tell ourselves.